end up winning more? Or?
Oh, you lose. No one makes money. And if you hear someone saying, I made money backing horses, he's living in Crowd Cuckoo land. Now, he might make money for a week, but if he keeps backing, he won't. I mean, when I was backing horses, I'd be backing, I would have been a social punter. Now, I would have maybe won 3 big bets in the year, but they'd be in top class races. They wouldn't be in handicaps. Whereas if you're in a handicap, every horse is handicapped to finish together. That don't work out.
So Tom, just to start off now.
Go on, tell me what you want me to do now.
Okay, start off first of all. Tell us about your family. Who they were.
My father was a Kerry man from North Kerry. He became a guard. See his thing over there behind it. And he met my mother, who was a Wexford lady. And in them days, when you married someone from where you were, you had to move 40 miles away. So he came to Tramore in 1930.
So he met her in Wexford?
He met her in Wexford, yeah, and she was a Wexford lady.
And he was
stationed in Bridgetown in Wexford.
Wow, and so they had to come to Waterford?
They had to come, Waterford was where he came and Waterford was where he stayed. And he told a great story. When he came, they had trunks, that was and trains. And the delivery was horse and cart. And he got off the train and there was a horse and cart to take his trunks up to the guards' barracks because he had to settle in Tramore and, seeing what was going on. So he had a £5 note. And all Easton's always had a paper shop and a cigarette shop and a little shop at all the railway stations. And they didn't have the change of the fiver. And across the roads where Manahan's was, now there's a fella selling, but that used to be Manahan's shop. It used to do, Flanagan's used to bring fish out on a Friday to supply some more. And where was it? What was
Flanagan's. He went across
Flanagan's, and they didn't have change. And the Deluxe was there, and they didn't have change. And in his Kerry accent, he said, "Isn't this a queer, poor place I'm after coming to now?" And he stayed here for the rest of his life. And he was known as Guard Barry. And there's more stories told about him. My mother ran a guest house opposite Martha's pub.
And did they like Tramore when they came?
There were 6 of us born within 8 years. We were all born we were all born as far as I don't know about the first, but the other 6 of us were born in Talbot Street at the back, Talbot Place, at the back of the Scout Hall. And then we moved to Queen Street, and my mother had a guest house down there, and all the school teachers and all the young guards used to stay there. And she was well known for giving good grub and clean house, but she ruled it with she was the boss.
And what was her maiden name?
Johnson from Fort Mountain in County Wexford. Murntown would be the name of the place, which was all Commons land.
And then where was he from in Kerry?
Kilflynn. You couldn't, the home of the IRA, North Kerry, it would have been a very wet part. He was a farmer.
And did he have Republican sympathies?
Oh yes, very much so. I said at one stage that I was trying to get away from under the clutches of parenthood to England. And the words was used, "There's none of mine going to get John Bull's money." There was no way that you could. That was it. That was law. There was no use asking Mum to say a word. Ma, will you ever say a word for him? That was the boot was down that day. There's none of mine earning John Bull's money.
And when you were very small then, first of all, what was your first memory of Tramore when you were small?
Oh, my first memory it happened when I was very young. And I don't know how young I was nearly swept away in the tide down on the Lady's Slip. And next door, a person where we lived alongside it was a girl called Nancy Murray, and she saved me. I can remember something going on with the tide taking me out. I had nappies and all on me now, but I just have a vague recollection. And I had said it to Nancy, and she remembers it very vividly now. Because she lives in England, but she comes home often. And the Murrays and the Barrys, we were born across the road from one another, and they'd be a Murray the same age as they'd be a Barry. And that's who I'm out with the horses. I have, but better not advertise this, I have free grass and free everything out there.
And just when you were small, was it kind of difficult having a dad that was a guard?
It was for me because I was a bit of I was wild. I was real wild. Like, I mean, me not knocking at doors and things like that would have been, that's all we did. But that was a horrible thing to do.
Knock a dolly.
Knock at someone's door and run away, and the woman come out, and we gone up the street. I mean, like that was and we used to have gallybanders, and we'd break electric lights bulbs and things like that. But I one of the first real memory that I'd have would be, which would give an insight probably into my whole personality, was when I made my first communion. And I made that on my 7th birthday. And in them days we wore short pantses, white ankle socks and sandals. I mean, that was the dress for the Holy Communion. And everyone had practically the same. There was no uniforms in school or anything like that. But we after a communion, we go up to the convent and they would have lemonade and buns for us. But the lemonade and buns mustn't have been ready. So we had a race around the convent grounds. I don't know, were you ever in the convent ground? You know, the way the circle that goes around there. And I came down on the bend and I scraped my knees and the blood went down into my white socks. And I came home and my mother said, you couldn't stay clean for one day. So it'll probably give you an insight.
So you were a bit of a rascal then?
Yeah, I did. So all the people around that were a bit older than me said, oh, he was wild.
And then when you were kids, like, where did you hang out? Did you hang out around where you lived, or did you?
Well, I mean, like when we were in Talbot Street, we had the Scout Hall there, right? And there was fields around. And when the Grand National come on, there was a stream over there where Murray's Field is and where Dr. Nolan is. And we used to. There was no houses like on the right or left, and there was a stream there. And when the Grand National was on, we were all horses and jockeys, and there was a field there, and we used to play cricket there, But I mean, like the hopscotch and things like that. And then there was a game where you had 5 stones, and you'd be throwing them up, and you'd be trying to get them on the back of your hand and catch them. But I mean, like, and kicking football on the street was on, but you could be thrown away. You'd be told to get away. Terrible, if you're kicking off of someone's door.
And where would you go? Where would you go swimming?
Oh, the lady slip, like, But that's where we went as mothers, like, But when we got bigger, then we went over to the cove. But I mean, like, swimming wouldn't have been. I wouldn't have been big into swimming now, because you see. But then when you were in Tramore, you always got a summer job. I mean, I started out in summer jobs. I'd say when I was 14 or 15, picking up classes over in the Grand Hotel. And then after that, I became assistant night porter. Oh, that was with a man called Michael Merrigan. That was an education. I would say, like, he educated me more than the school did.
Like what? What kind of things?
Like, you'd see how he operated. And how to get tips and you know what I mean, like, and how to do a bit of plough moss and say good evening and thank you very much and are you all right, madam, and and we used to, and in them days the American tour buses used to come. Michael Merrigan used to say, come on, Bar, get your slates on now, another busload of arthritis has arrived. And they all had big cases, and we had to drag them up the stairs. There was no lift in the Grand Hotel. And we used to say, and all they were changing was their underwear. We had a different way. We didn't say underwear, I can assure you. But and all the cases had to come up. I can't remember whether we had to bring them or whether we gone off when they had to come down. But God, they were every shape and size.
The cases now?
The cases and the people, both of them. I mean, Merrigan used to say, I think I'm after saying it already, another Bar, get them skates on, another busload of arthritis, as I write. And they all, well, you probably can't say that, they were all big, small, crooked. They weren't straightforward.
And the Grand was very grand, wasn't it?
Oh, the Grand Hotel was the place. I mean, like...
and Who was the owner then?
A lady called Nan Murphy. And you know where the Scouts Hall is? And you know where Kent, the man that sells the ice cream there, you'd see the coloured van. Her car used to be kept there. It was a cream car. I would have been involved in the Grand Hotel nearly always, because being a guard son, I was able to go in the back door and in through the kitchen and I get an ice cream. I don't know whether it was my face or whatever it was, but that's the way it was, And then we had the table tennis. We had the table tennis in the Scout Hall. Played a lot of table tennis. A lot of good players around now. A lot of fellas from Waterford now, Temperance Hall and those now, they were pretty good. That was the first game that I ever played.
And did you ever get instruction on it?
No, you just looked at better paper. You looked at better players. There's a friend of mine now that will be talking horses, and he always said, he's 10 years younger than me. He said, Tom, you were analysing everything naturally. You weren't thinking about it, but you were watching. I don't remember. You know what I mean? But when you see fellas, you'd say, why is he better than you, and what, and some of them teach you, and tell you to do this, that and the other thing. I mean, there was the first, I got it, maybe some of the lads are after telling you, the first GAA thing that was won by Tramore was won by under 15 footballers. And you know what the competition was? The Street League in Waterford. And I'm sure some of them have said it to you. There's a picture of that.
Oh, were you on the team?
I was on the team, yeah.
Okay.
And
we'll get a picture of that afterwards, Tom.
A couple of the lads now that were on, you probably were talking to a good few GAA fellas, were you?
Oh, a few, yeah.
And then the GAA, I think Moon Lawn, out there, that was the first GAA pitch that we had. Because my late dad now was a founder member of the GAA. He was the first secretary. I'd say he was secretary for 15 years. Being a guard, and at that time, it's probably still the same. There was a thing called BO, which meant barrack orderly. You were on for 24 hours, because the Garda station had to open. So there'd be no one calling during the night, and he'd be able to write up the minutes of the meeting and do his business that way.
So he was big into...
Oh, big into GAA, and he never played, and being from Kerry. So he
played?
No. But he was unusual now. But then, I have 4 children, right? And none of them has interest in one of them had interest in basketball. But I mean, I had an interest in every sport, from tiddlywinks to you name it. I had an interest. And, I just...
Skips a generation.
Oh, I don't know, but none of my children, and I have a grandchild out in Australia, and I believe he's a good tennis player. But his dad would be very competitive now. I would be very competitive. The only thing I wasn't competitive was school.
Okay. And was there any problem about playing soccer?
Oh yeah, major problem. In my house was we couldn't go. Some of the lads did go, but I mean, it was if you went and you were found out, we would have lost the match. I mean, we of course we did duck down to Cork and places like that. I mean, I think we were where Mick O'Connell was seen, who was a great Kerry footballer, was seen with a Cork Hibernian and Waterford match going on in the great days. I mean, Waterford, before the ban came, but if you were playing, you just couldn't. And I don't think there was a thing. I wasn't around for it, but they said we were supposed to only go to Kaylee's.
Oh, not to
roll and on. Yeah, but rock and roll hadn't come in,
Show bands,
I mean, when I started going out with Nuala, the Olympic was flying, you had Johnny Clipper Carlton's, our own Royal Show Band, and tucks of bands coming, and the queue would go right around to O'Regan shop, it's.
And what about the Atlantic?
Well, the Atlantic was just a summer place, and then the Silver Slipper opened. So I mean, In our heyday, we were known to go into town to the pictures and go to the dance on the way home. Which one? Oh yeah.
Well, the dances were late, weren't they?
Oh yeah, well, there was 2 sessions. There was 8 to 11 and 12 to 3, I think. But there was nothing in the town, only that. Like, I mean, like, there was where you know, they started Dooley's Flats. There was a shop making Tramore rock there. That's way back now. I can remember that. Yeah.
And what about the cinema? Did you go to the cinema?
Well, the cinema, I say it didn't. The Rex didn't open until 73 or 4 years ago, because I was being brought up to school with my brothers, and we were still in Talbot Street. And you know that there's a thing coming out from Carl's shop, and the wire of that fell on me, so I got home for the day. You know, which would be a major problem today. I don't know how much damage it did to me. I can't remember, but you know what I mean. That was being built, and we used to.
You were only a child when it was being built.
Oh, but I was only a child, yeah. I would say, well, I was going to school, because I can vaguely sort of remember me 2 brothers with my hand caught at each side. I don't know how it didn't hit them, but that hit me. And I think they went up to school, and the fella delivering bread brought me home. Whether that's true or false, but it's a sort of a memory that's there.
And would you remember going to the cinema there?
Oh yeah. And we'd be like Garda, and Gus Giles would push the lights on us. We'd be up in the gods, like, you know, in the hard seats. Tom Mix and the boys and the trailers for the. They used to have a thing that they'd carry on every week, so that we'd go back to follow it up, like
a serial.
A serial, yeah. That is, but I mean, I have a brother that says there was over 2,000. I would have thought about 1,200. Kennedy Park and Marion Park, they were built by builders from Carrick. You know, it gives you a fair insight into what the way life was, not alone in Tramore, but in surrounding districts and trade and industry. They came down from Carrick to build the houses in Tramore, and they came down and lived here when it was going on. Because there was one of the Nolans that was a bit wilder than me, so I lost my title.
So Tramore was a very small place?
Very, very small place. I mean, like Moonlown, where it is now, I think that was the first GAA pitch. And the next one they went to was the Tank Field. And then they went down to where they are now. The ploughing match, the national ploughing match. There used to be a thing on the wall there commemorating the national ploughing match. And that must have been 60 years ago. Because I was working in the Grand Hotel at the time, you know. And
did you... well, just first of all, where did you meet your wife then?
Oh, inside in town. Inside the dance.
Oh, right, the Olympia.
In the Olympia, yeah.
Oh, was she from Waterford?
She Waterford girl, yeah.
Oh, right. And did she like the idea of moving to Tramore?
Oh, it is. I had to... We did a lot of moving before I got home. And I had met her, and I told her I was going away to be into the guards. This was when I first met her, but I was too short. And I didn't have any. I had the intercert. I got out of doing the leaving cert, and I became a barman. And I worked down in Youghal, and I came. I don't know. And I came back then, and I ran the Esquire for a couple of years. I could have been a jockey at the time, and I haven't this out to show it to you because it was out there for years.
That's a great photograph. We'll get those afterwards. We'll take shots.
No. But I'm just saying, you know, that's not there. That wasn't there. It was there because I don't know. It's there always.
And so, what year did you eventually come back here?
I worked in the Esquire. I worked in Youghal for a couple of years, and then I got this job in the Esquire. And at that stage, I was seriously courting, and I said to my late father, you know, and that job wasn't going to you know, the work was long. You were off, which was I think it was 6 days a week sort of a thing. And Sunday were broken hours from 12 to 3 and from 6 to 10. And Friday was your half day, and I remember saying to my father, I said, look, I have to get out of the Esquire. And I said, would you ask Mr. Halley, Mr. Halley used to come into the Esquire. He'd be Bill Halley's father and John Halley, Cool Moore's father, great Tramore people. Like the Halley, they're all the one. They're all the one apple tree. And he said, no. He said, Tom, you can ask him yourself. When I wanted you to go to school, you didn't go to school. So I said, I knew Mr. Halley well because he used to come in every day at dinner time for a break. And I used to pick the horses for him and go next door and back the horses. And I was getting half the winnings for no outlet. So, I mean, I had the handicap book and I had the time to study it. And it was reasonably, I knew what was going on. It wasn't that. And he got me a job in Irish Rubber Products in the Glen. And then I went from there. I was only the buy-in there. And then I went to Advanced Tire. And I was a van salesman in Advanced Tire. We got married and we lived over in Church Road in a chalet for the winter, and we had to move out in the summer because you get more money, and went in to live with my mother-in-law. And they opened the depot. Advanced Tire now was in its infancy, opened the depot in Carlow, and I was transferred to there as van man with Murty Ware, who would have been, he'd be a brother of the Wares, the great hurlers, from Jim and Charlie, and he'd been one of them big, tall man. And I bought my first house in Carlow, 12 Monacurra, and we newly came up to live. It was a building site, and a fella called Jim Dial was the builder, and I told him that my mortgage was coming from Carlow County Council, and which was taking longer than now. And I asked him, was there any chance of coming to live here? And and he said, yeah. And I said, I'll pay you what I'd be paying to Carlow when it comes. So we put the money away every week, and we were coming home for Christmas. And I said to Nuala, I said, we better go and give this money to Mr. Dial, because there's no use having it in the house. I'd say there was over £100 in it, which was a lot of money. So I went over to Mr. Dial and I said, Mr. Dial, look, there's the money I owe you. And he said, how much is there? I can't really give you the exact thing. And he said, you give me half and you keep half. Because he said, I've done this for a lot of people in my time, but none of them have come to pay me, and you were the first. It was a building site still. I was so delighted. What did I do? I was running home to tell Nuala we had money. I fell and cut my knees again, and I took the knees out of my trousers this time. And we can. And then I had a crash, and through no fault of my own. I was driving a Thames van on a Monday, which had no front, and it was wore out, so I got a new van that had a front. And then a few days after getting the new van up outside Rathnew, a lorry crashed into me. If I had had the Thames, I'd be in a wheelchair, because he would have come straight through. And my late father told me to go see a solicitor, right? And I wouldn't go. I said, the company are paying me. And he said, are they paying you for paying? I said, but sure, anyway, I said, sure, the fella that hit in me, he was just like myself, he was only a driver. So I never did anything about it. I often regret it, because I had fractured ribs and the sore. And they transferred me then down to Tralee as depot manager. So I was in the throes of buying a house when the manager of Waterford got sick, and there was a man promoted in front of me that wasn't a manager before me. So I said, I have news for you lads, I'll be changing, because I was being headhunted by another company all the time. So, and that got me back to Tramore. I'm back here, I think, 46 or 7 years. We're the first into this house.
And I suppose then you saw Tramore then at a different time. I mean, did you notice a big change?
Oh, I did. Well, you see, I was always coming down.
Okay.
Yeah, I was into hurling and I had a misdemeanour underage, and I got suspended, and it was a bold one. So I never came back, and I joined the pitch and putt club.
When the misdemeanour, did you mean you hit the ref or a player?
No, I didn't hit the player, but I was going to hit him. and I had a hurley in my hand. We let it at that now, because if it happened today, it'd be assault. Or threatened. It wouldn't be assault, it would have been threatened assault. Now, that's what
I thought it would be very hard to get into trouble in a hurl.
Oh boy. I mean, like, we had to, not going away from the subject, I mean, like, Tramore, Dunhill and Fenner. I can remember Canon Coffey telling us to behave ourselves, going out to play off the pulpit, going out to play against Fenner or Dunhill, I can't remember which.
There was such rivalry.
There was such rivalry. And you would have had cousins on one team and cousins on the others, you know what I mean? That it wasn't...
So it was blood and guts.
Oh, it's for blood and guts. But there was fun. I mean, I had a brother of mine that said to me, it's nothing to do with, this is nothing to do with Tramore, but it's to do with the way that the world has revolved. He said to me maybe 25 years ago, he said the fun has gone out of sport. And he couldn't be so, and he said that 25 years ago. I mean, there's no fun.
It's gone too serious.
It's gone too serious. I mean, like, you fellas in gyms and one thing and another, and yeah. I mean, like the GA player, you might as well say he's professional. I mean, when you look at the Bennetts of today, I mean, they're going travelling the world, And back in our time, if you could play for Waterford, even though we weren't great, that was a big thing to hold for your county. But you see the lads now, and they want to travel the world, and everything is vastly different.
Yeah, and I suppose, as you say, it's gone a lot more serious.
Yeah, I mean, I hear the lads talking about the golf now, and my pals now. I played a lot of golf. I played golf for 35. Well, I played pitch and putt for a good few years, and then I got to the golf. And the golf was a very I don't know what sort of a word you'd use. You would have a better command. It would have been a bit
upper class.
Upper class, like, And
was it like that in Tramore?
Oh, it was like that every place. I mean, in Tramore was as bad as any place.
So pitch and putt was the working class?
Oh, yeah. And there was a lot of pitch and putt courses around now. And it was very highly competitive, and some great golfers came out of it now.
And then, you said you played... Sorry, you went from hurling to pitch and
putt. And then to golf.
And where did you play pitch and putt first?
Down in the opposite where the Hydra was, alongside the prom, the other side, it's a car park there. There was 2 pitch and putt courses there, one for the holiday maker and a harder one inside.
And what was the name of the woman they used to
Mary Armstrong. I came across her tombstone the other day in the graveyard. I happened to be over there. She was a great character. Mary Armstrong.
What kind of things would she be saying?
It wouldn't. She used a lot of makeup. I mean, like, you're talking like, that when I was about 22 or 23, which today, if you put a 22 or a 23 today, it's a 14-year-old would have more comp on than we had a 23, a 14-year-old of today would have it. You know what I mean? They're much more advanced, like, I mean, like, when you think back of what's going on and the revolution that's happened in the last 25 years, it makes you wonder, like, I mean... So you're a handy pitch and putt? Yeah, I finished 4th. I don't want to be bragging, but I thought it was an everyday occurrence. I'd say at the time, if I would have been in the top 20 in Tramore, I would have been doing well. But you had to qualify to get into the All-Ireland. And I qualified, which, at the time I didn't think anything of it. And I finished 4th in Ireland, 1963 or 4, 64, 65. And when I look back at it now, I think it was a tremendous achievement. But when it happened, I didn't pay one blind bit of notice to it.
Was that because the standard was so high in Tramore?
Oh, standard was very high in Tramore. I mean, but the standard was high every place. I mean, there was a lot of fellas that won the pitch and putt that played golf for Ireland now. It's not, you know, I mean, if any fella that played pitch and putt to a reasonable standard always became a pretty useful golfer. Because if you hit the ball 200 yards, that's a shot. And if you have to put in from 6 inches, that's as equal to the shot of 200. And most fellas that played pitch and putt, we would have been good chippers and putters. And I probably became a very good competitor. Not by choice, but I was playing men, you know, I was a chap, and most of the fellas that I would have been playing, I would say there was only John Power, Sean Merrigan. There'd only been about 5 or 6 fellas under 25 playing. And we'd be, you know, you mightn't have a competition and you might be playing a man of 30 or 40. And he had maybe 4 or 5 pounds in his pocket and you were paying him for a half a crown and you'd only 1/2 crown. You would have, what would you say? Get the mind focused, I can assure you.
So it'd always be a side bet?
Oh, always. I mean, like in the side bets were, you know, more so in the golf now than in anything else, you know, and the winner had to buy. Right. So, and there was some, I have to say, I had some great times in the golf now. Great crack. We were, I'm from listening to the lads, we were so competitive. There was a gang of us in it and we were highly competitive. We wanted to play off of low handicaps. Didn't make a difference about the prizes or anything now, where I think it's vastly different now. You can rig your own handicap. Well, you could have rigged your own handicap in them days, but the gang that I was with, we were all highly competitive now.
Okay. And come here, and then when you went into the golf club first, was there many working class people at that stage?
No, not a whole lot. You know, more came in, but now, I mean, when the crash came, they were advertising for members. I played for 35 years now.
And just go right back to your childhood. What kind of characters would you remember around town?
Oh, just famous characters. See, but you don't know whether you can use their names. There was a fella called Cooney. There was a fella Rooney Butler. Rooney Butler now taught an awful lot of the lads how to play golf. The Eddie Powers and the Michael Burns, who played golf for Ireland. Eddie Power won 2 close champions and Michael Burns won a Munster championship. And Rooney was a great soccer player, great snooker player, and a very good golfer. And he was able to golf with a sports coat on him, and he'd be collecting balls. There could be a dozen balls in this pocket and a dozen balls in the other pocket, and he'd be able to hit the golf ball as sweet as a nut. And I read in a book somewhere that I was sitting down waiting, somewhere in Tramore, could be a dentist or doctors, and there was this book of tourism, and there was an article on Rooney Butler. And Rooney, there was birds 9 times out of 10 following Rooney, you know. And this book, the reason that the birds were following him, he'd a hole in his pocket, and he'd a slice of bread in the pocket, and he used to be breaking the bread with his pocket, and the birds were coming along behind him. There was an article on a book about it. I mean, he was a great, great character. Now, he taught me how to play golf. He taught, when I used to go up every Friday night to practice, and he'd give me a bit of a lesson. And he was a bit deaf, and but my 2 sons used to come up then, and we used to practice where there was a bit of open greenery. We'd off the 12th tee, which there was a big a forest between the 9th and that bit. And he said to my sons, he says, your father's after hitting balls in there and they'll never be found.
And like did he do sign language?
No, he didn't, but it was just like he tic-tacking, like, you know, hold your hands up and do this and do that, you know. But he was a brilliant striker of a golf ball. I mean, like, different than what they are today now. They bait a golf ball, but the golfers of when I joined, we were using our wrists. We were much, you know, we had more finesse.
Oh, right.
But Tramore growing up, oh God, talking about the church, priests used to come here on holidays, and it was a great pocket money job serving mass. There was 4 or 5 side altars in Tramore, and there might be 10 priests around. And I often served 2 masses in the one day, and I got the good job then. The bishops used to come, right, and they used to eat in the Grand Hotel, and you know the flats that's looking out over Shallows Hill out onto the bay. That was known as Clifton. It was an annex of the Grand. If there was someone very important came, they stayed in there. So the bishops stayed there. And I got the job of serving the bishops. Much better than the ordinary priest. The payday was very good. But you had to, you had to be up to every trick and trade in the... But I mean, it's hard to believe, the way they say.
What were the shops that you remember you were small?
Oh, God. You had 3 butcher shops here, I'd say. You had Torpies, you had Malais, and you had Plunkets. The L&N was where, the first L&N now, where there's a Chinese there, opposite Cal's, but the front of it was facing out there. You could buy a cap. You could buy a cap in Tramore. You could buy curtains in Tramore. If you wanted a cap today, could you buy one in Tramore? The only place you could buy a cap in Tramore now would be the charity shop. We could buy caps and all that, and curtains. It was a paper shop as well as a draper shop. That's where what's there now, I suppose, Boots and the charity shop. Well, the L&N went from there into there.
And what about we mentioned the 15th of August? You said you were into the horses. Tell us a little bit about the horses.
Well, the horses, it was, we wouldn't pay to get into the horses. It was galvanised around there, and we'd get in through the hole up at the top of the regulation. And you'd go around and you'd collect tote tickets, because someone might have lost a tote ticket, and you'd get the result, and, and you'd get a few bob. Come on in. And you'd get a few bob that way, And if there was an objection, that was real work. If there was an objection, because people would have thrown away their ticket, and you'd have a different result. So we were all at it. It wasn't only Tom Barry was at it now. Any fella that had any bit of sense was at it. Because people, they'd be having, we had the outside of the racecourse, where all the families went with the Foxford rug, and we had tea and sandwiches, and there was a bar in the middle of the course, there was a tote in the middle of the course, and there was bookmakers in the middle of the course. There was also a cricket pitch. That was a great thing when I was young. If you wanted to get tea and cakes, go up to the cricket after the first innings, and the women, the wives of the fellas playing cricket would make tea and cakes. I used to go up there during the break of the innings, and you get the tea and the cakes. Lovely cakes now, all homemade cakes, you couldn't beat them.
And speaking of which, I presume the cricket would be seen more as the Protestant game, was it?
It was, but it early in Ireland, it was the predominant game.
Before hurling.
Hurling and them only all started, when was the centenary? It's
1880.
1880. Yeah. But before 1880, cricket. Kilmacow had a cricket team, because I knew men from Kilmacow, and they can, much older than I was, and they can remember playing cricket in Kilmacow.
But I'm just wondering about, because you mentioned the golf club, and now you're talking about cricket, but was there much of a divide between the Protestant and the Catholic community here?
It's hard to say, because we had very few Protestants. I would say there's no difference now, but there certainly was a difference then. But it wasn't anything severe, or anything that you'd notice, or anything that you'd have a conscience about now with the changing times. I had some great friends, Protestants. The manager of the L&N was a Protestant at the time here.
And Joe, you were talking about the sugar. I was going to say something now, but just go on. Tell me a little bit more about the horse for a second.
Well, racing was here. We were the first 4-day meeting there was only one other 4-day meeting in Ireland, and we'll call it the British Isles. Tramore had a 4-day meeting, and Ascot had. Now Galway have a week racing, but we haven't gone on to the way like the Galway came on. But probably because our land was so tight and the course is so tight that it doesn't get the standard of horse. But when I was young, it would have got the best of horses here, because if you could run in Tramore, you could probably run anywhere because of the intricacies of the course. I mean, it's uphill, it's downdale, and if you can't, horses find it hard to come down a hill. They find it much easier to go up hills. But I mean, like, it used to be a big thing. I mean, the whole town would be packed. The Grand would be open all day and all night. And I mean, like, do you know where the library is? There were stables in there because the racecourse couldn't hold the number of horses because we didn't have the modes of transport. Like, you know what I mean? Like, all the racehorse trainers in my time when I was working in the Grand Hotel stayed there. Because, I mean, like, today they'd come for the races and they'd gone home immediately after it. Whereas in them days it would take them X amount of time to get home. So they all stayed there. The Paddy Slaters, the Paddy Means, some great characters now.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about your dad,
Right.
Garda.
Right.
What was it? Was there any crime in Tramore?
They knew everything that was going on. They knew everything that was going on. They were on the beat. I mean, there's a story told. Now, I don't know whether it's true or false. There was only, in the winter time, I think there was 4 guards here. Guard Barry, Guard Murphy, Guard Connolly, who was a great character, and Pat King. And there would have been a sergeant and a superintendent. But in the early days, when the train was going now, and I can't remember when the train went off, we had what was known as the bona fide laws. We were a summer resort, and the pubs were left stay open till 10 o'clock. I wouldn't be sure of the time, whereas in Waterford they closed at 7. So all the lads, after a few drinks, would come out to Tramore. No, I don't know whether it's a story or a recollection I have, but the guards would go to the railway station just to see, if there was any trouble coming, so that they'd be able to head it off. And Joe Connolly was a big, strong man, like. Big, strong man. And these 2 fellas reportedly got off the train and they were having a few clatters at one another. And Connolly said to my father, "Barry, have you the cufflinks with you?" "I have." He said, "I'm going to catch this fella and I'll give him to you and I'll hold on to the other fella." And handcuffed him to the railings, because there's always railings in the... So they handcuffed the 2 of them to the railings and left them there till the last train was going back. They couldn't spend a penny. They could do nothing with their arms folded. Now, whether it's true or false, but knowing Joe Connolly, and it's a compliment now I'd be giving him, I think, I mean, because they could go up to town and cause all sorts of trouble, and the guards weren't under the scrutiny that they were. I mean, I would say in my poor late mother must have, Queen Street would be a basement house. And there'd be mothers calling, to Guard Barry, "Will you get after that young fella of mine?" And if Guard Barry met the young fella, he'd say to him, "I'll tell your mother on you." It's not a story, it's a true story. But whether you can use it or not is about 2 years ago. A family that I know, they introduced me to a sister of theirs that was a nurse but went to live in Germany. And she introduced me and she said, "I didn't get your surname." I said, "Barry." And she said to me, "Would you be happening to Guard Barry?" I said, "I'm a son of his," and that's always, you don't know what's going to come next. But 9 times out of 10, it's good, because if it's bad, they're not going to say it to your face. It's human nature. So I said, "It's Barry." She says, "I have a story to tell you." I said, "Yeah." I said, "Tell me." And she said, I don't know what age I was. I said, "But the sister up in school was tapping my calf and my leg with the ruler." And I turned to her and I said, "If you don't stop, I'm going to tell Guard Barry on you." So I was having a few half ones here that night, and I said, "The name of the divine God." It was an 11 or 12-year-old girl thinking about Garda Barry. So I asked a few of the girls around that would have been of that vintage. Oh yeah, they said it was either Garda Barry or the Good Shepherd. you'd either tell Garda Barry or you'd be sent to the Good Shepherd. You know, and that was the community spirit that was in it. You know,
Yes.
there was
Tom, just from a time point of view, we have to get to Norfolk.
Yeah, go ahead.
But that was fantastic. That was fantastic. And the only pity is we didn't have another hour.
Oh, well, I can talk about Tramore for an hour. And the last thing I'll say to you, there's a pal of ours used to pass the door. I think he was at sea for a long time. He drank a good bit anyway, and he used to pass that door, and I used to say, well, Ted, how are you going? How are you, Tom? We're all here, but are we all there? Oh, it was some great characters. Cooney and Rooney never got the dole until captain and the sergeant of the guards went after him to get it. You know? They didn't know about it. And Cooney would have been another one of the same, you know.
Kind of simple people.
Oh, very clever people. But, yeah, but you know, not knowing the law. I mean, like, to survive on nothing, by Gigi, you have to be bright. You mightn't be academically bright, but I mean, my education is very it'd be a limited. But I went to the University of Life in Villanova.